This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this half hour of CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. We are just 2 weeks away from the midterm elections, and on both sides, it is all about getting out the vote. There are 218 House races at stake, 17 Senate seats, 18 governorships, and more than 3,300 state House and Senate races. With 6 toss-ups in the Senate, it is not likely to change hands. But there are 31 toss-ups in the House, which means the Democrats could gain control of that body. Evangelicals will again be a crucial voting bloc for Republicans. Exit polls show 81% of white evangelicals voted for President Donald Trump in 2016. That was the highest margin of support for a Republican presidential candidate since 2004, when 78% voted to re-elect President George W. Bush. John Graves of Vision America is helping to educate evangelical voters. Vision America prints voter guides and makes them available to churches so Christians can know where candidates stand on the issues. But his group has become the target of some dirty tricks. In Texas, for example, someone copied their voter guides and reworded them to mislead voters. Take a look at this. On the left side is the real guide, and on the right side is the fake one. Republican Senate candidate Ted Cruz is pro-life, but as you can see on the fake side, it says he opposes right to life. Hundreds of those fake voter guides were distributed at several campuses of a mega church in Dallas-Fort Worth. John Graves joins us now to tell us more. So, John, tell us more about what happened with these fake voter guides.
Well, thank you for having me. We share these all over the nation, and each state, like Texas, they're the same everywhere. We give them free to churches, and so we have no way to know how widespread this is. But I got a call this weekend and said, "Hey, John, did you know there's some fraudulent voter guides or fake voter guides with inaccurate information?" So we began looking into it and found what you have now shown everybody. We don't know. We know it's happened in different cities. We have no way to know how widespread this is or who's behind it. We're trying to get to the bottom of that now.
Now, they keep your logo as we showed, but rewrote the guide with some different information. Is that illegal?
It is. It's a copyright violation. If it's found out to be from Beto's campaign, it's a violation of the FEC under federal law. There's fraud. There's all kinds of other issues. We're having some attorneys that are specialists in election law and voter fraud look into it as well.
Now, I understand some evangelical women are being misled to vote against a Senate candidate because these fake guides misrepresent his position. Tell us about that.
Okay, yeah. So one of the questions that they did, there were a lot of the Democrat or Beto talking points, if you will, and one of those is that it misleads people to say Senator Cruz wants to separate families at the border. That actually has been part of the interview. Ted Cruz that's not his position. He's actually trying to work against that and trying to pass legislation in the Senate. And so it's just an attempt to deceive. But probably the nastiest part of this is that they snuck secretly inside of churches. We don't know how many they're doing this. We don't know if it's just in this state or other states. But they snuck inside churches to deceive church members. And I've been around this for over 20 years. I've never seen or heard anything like that. So it's pretty appalling.
What are some of the most important issues to evangelical voters in these midterm elections?
The Supreme Court has been the big, huge issue. If you look at the statistical polls, 60% of the people that are evangelical that voted for Donald Trump didn't necessarily like him or want to vote for him, but they wanted the Supreme Court appointments, and they're very happy with those. The second, it used to be pro-life. Pro-life has now been surpassed in some ways in many of these states by religious liberty because people are losing their religious liberties. And if you lose your religious liberty, then you can't even talk about pro-life. And then obviously the marriage issue with men going in women's bathroom was a huge battle here in Texas this last cycle and in many, many states around the country. But we try to deal with many issues. We talk to the pastors, ask them what the top issues are, and try to deal with many of those. And we footnote ours. One of the things that was fascinating is we footnote ours. They just left it blank and made campaign statements, if you will.
All right, John Graves of Vision America, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
The Trump administration is redefining transgender. Officials want to change the definition of gender to a biological condition determined at birth as either male or female. The New York Times reports the Department of Health and Human Services is leading an effort to establish a legal definition of sex under Title IX. Under it, a person's gender could not be changed once it was defined by the genitalia he or she is born with. Joining us now with more on this is Jenna Ellis. She is the constitutional law attorney and the director of public policy with the James Dobson Family Institute. So, Jenna, how does this affect future Title IX cases?
Well, this isn't really the Trump administration redefining so much as going back to pre-Obama era regulations and policy. So this is a very good thing for America, and the faith-based community should be encouraged because what the HHS memo is essentially attempting to do is to go back to that pre-Obama era regulation that says that gender-based discrimination, when we're talking about that and the term sex specifically, is just talking about male versus female. It wouldn't include transgender, sexual orientation, or gender identity language, which is properly excluded from the definition of sex. So hopefully moving forward, not only will this be a good thing to establish a consistent definition within the Trump administration, but it should encourage Congress that we really need to have them act on this to provide a legal definition to make sure that those Title IX cases are clarified.
Why is it important for the Department of Health and Human Services to have a clear-cut definition of sex?
Because they deal with these types of regulations quite frequently. And I think that it's not only important for HHS, but it's also going to be important for any type of executive agency, as well as the Supreme Court, to have a clear understanding of what Congress meant by sex when they originally established Title IX. And so this is an ongoing conversation in American policy, and certainly in the social agenda circles, where the LGBT community is attempting to shoehorn these other types of identities, and really fictitious identities that go against biological science, into Title IX and into the definition of sex. And so for the Trump administration to stand firm to say that sex-based discrimination really is only gender-based, biologically male and female, is not only consistent with science, but it's consistent with the traditional definition that we've had as a country and understood as a country throughout our history.
Some see this law as discriminatory towards transgender people. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is just basically going along with science. And so for the LGBT community to attempt, again, to try to create certain rights that are not present within sex-based discrimination, they're attempting to draw a distinctly protected class that really should not properly or scientifically or biologically fall under the definition of sex-based discrimination. And so we can certainly have those conversations. But again, Congress has never passed a law that has recognized that those types of categories, sexual orientation or gender identity, is part of the definition of sex when we're talking about discrimination. And so what they should properly do is go to Congress. But they know, and the left knows, that they can't get that through Congress. So they've been attempting to do this through the Supreme Court, through other policies in the executive branches, and they were relatively successful under the Obama administration. So for the Trump administration to take this very clear stand is very encouraging, not only to the James Dobson Family Institute, but I think with all of our faith-based partners.
All right, Jenna, thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
The Oregon couple forced to close their bakery for refusing to make a cake to celebrate a same-sex wedding is taking their case to the Supreme Court. Aaron and Melissa Klein had to shut down their business after a state agency fined them $135,000. The Bureau of Labor and Industries also issued a gag order forbidding them to discuss their beliefs publicly. The Oregon State Supreme Court reversed the gag order but upheld the board's decision to fine the bakers. Now the Kleins are appealing that decision to the nation's high court. First Liberty attorney Kelly Shackelford said the case will, quote, clarify whether speech is truly free if it's government mandated. Thousands of Central Americans pushed past border police and into Mexico this weekend. The migrant caravan headed for the U.S. has increased to about 7,000. President Trump is threatening to use military force at the U.S. border to keep them out. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo met with Mexico's President Sunday, saying the caravan is supported by leaders with political motivations. President Trump blames the caravan and on an open borders policy he says the Democrats support. He tweeted the caravan is a disgrace to the Democratic Party. Well, he spent 2 years imprisoned in Turkey on charges related to terrorism, but after intense pressure from the Trump administration, evangelical pastor Andrew Brunson was released and was back here in the U.S. the next day. CBN senior international correspondent Gary Lane sat down with Brunson to talk about his experience. Here's part one of that interview.
You were in house arrest, and then within 24 hours, you were in the United States, sitting in the Oval Office with the President of the United States. How did that feel?
Well, it's kind of a Joseph situation. Actually, I was just a week ago standing in a Turkish courtroom, and it became apparent suddenly that they were going to convict me. We did not know what was going to happen, but it was clear they had decided to convict me. And I didn't know how many years they would give me at that time and how it would escalate things politically, how many years I'd end up in prison. And within 24 hours, and after I was convicted as a terrorist in Turkey, I'm officially convicted now, but released for time served, and then within 24 hours to be able to visit the White House and pray with the president. It's a Joseph type situation. Being in solitary confinement was very, very difficult, especially for a long time. I didn't have a Bible, there were no books, it was just a bed, and that was it. And so I had nothing to do throughout the entire day. And actually what really saved me there is somehow a booklet by Mike Bickle. Somebody got it into me, which we were not allowed to have books, but someone got that into me, and it was just some prayer points. And that helped me to keep my sanity. I just began to pray through that, and I'd pace back and forth across that room for hours, just praying through these prayer points, crying out to God.
And before this interview, you were telling me how you started dancing before the Lord. Tell me how that came about.
Well, I read a book by Richard Wurmbrand where he describes how when he was in solitary confinement, that God says, Jesus said actually, blessed are you when people persecute you and revile you, falsely say all kinds of evil things about you. Rejoice and be glad, exceedingly glad actually. And Wurmbrand danced before the Lord in obedience to this. And I thought, well, I don't feel joy, I don't sense joy right now, but I am going to dance before the Lord as Wurmbrand did, as a sacrifice of praise. I was really broken, and then it was in the second year that God began to rebuild me. I could think of several of my friends. I thought they would do so much better in this situation. They're prayer warriors, they're intercessors, they would just spend all their time praying. And I said a number of times, God, you got the wrong man. You chose the wrong man for this. This is a mistake because I'm so weak. So he allowed me to be broken. I believe God allowed this. But then he began to rebuild me in the second year.
Coming up, a stern warning by Israel's prime minister for terror groups rioting near the nation's border. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised painful blows against Hamas if they don't stop their violent protest. As Chris Mitchell reports now from Jerusalem, the threat comes after several months of riots along Israel's southern border.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel may choose a different way to confront Hamas's violence.
We're close to a different kind of action. This action will include very painful blows. If Hamas is smart, it will cease its fire and violent outbursts now.
Hamas-led riots began on March 30th. IDF spokesman Jonathan Conricus told CBN News Hamas plans events for different days. On Monday, it's the beach.
For instance, Mondays are always the naval riots, when they embark from the Gaza harbor and they try to breach into Israeli waters.
Friday is the weekly main event,
where an average of about 18,000 rioters gather in 6 different locations, trying to violently get across into Israel, becoming more and more violent. We see a clear escalation in violence in the weapons that they use. Last Friday, the most violent attempt, IEDs were placed by Palestinians on the fence, were detonated, and that blew a hole in the fence through which 20 or so Palestinians got in, and they tried to assault an IDF position. Hamas is actively pushing Palestinians towards the fence, really escalating the level of violence and trying to get Palestinians killed on the fence.
Ambassador Michael Oren addressed the Gaza situation to Christian journalists from around the world.
The demonstrator is the new missile. It's actually a better missile, because in most cases it's multi-usage. And they get the picture. They get the picture of innocent kids being killed by Israel, which causes the same type of damage. It erodes our national legitimacy.
Earlier, CBN News got a first-hand look at what Israeli soldiers have faced for more than half a year.
It's not legitimate and civilian riot. The leaders of the riot is Hamas, and they are trying to challenge us.
Hamas has also flown hundreds of arson balloons into Israel that burned thousands of acres of Israeli farmland. The goal of Hamas is to infiltrate into Israeli border communities to attack Israeli civilians.
It should be very clear to our enemies that there is a limit to the amount of violence that can be tolerated, to the amount of terror that is inflicted upon Israeli civilians. And of course, IDF has the tools and the capabilities to defend against those.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
CBN saw more than 100,000 requests for the booklet Build a Better Gut. Many viewers asking questions like, how can I eat healthy foods for my gut without breaking the bank? Medical reporter Lori Johnson has some answers.
Just because some unhealthy foods like processed macaroni and cheese are cheap and some healthy foods like wild-caught salmon are expensive, don't think for a minute you have to spend a lot to eat healthy.
Tiffany Terzak is living proof. She feeds her Atlanta family of 4 super healthy food for, get this, only $330 a month.
We eat real food, so food that comes from the ground, animals that eat plants from the ground. We hardly eat anything processed, and by processed, I'm referring to boxes, just add water type of things. We don't eat that.
Tiffany's online grocery budget boot camp is so popular, there's a waiting list. Probably because she saves her students an average of $2,400 a year.
I believe God has given me the gift of teaching people how to eat real food on a budget. Everything involved in that arena comes easy to me, and I know it's hard for other people.
Tiffany took me to her local grocery and shared her top tips, like stocking up on sale items.
What really caught my eye is this, and these are drumsticks for $1.79 per pound, marked down from $2.49, and these are free-range organic as well. And there are several packages up here. There's at least, 4, 5, 6 packages of them. So when someone is concerned about eating healthier food, trying to buy organics, but they always say that organic costs so much, if you just keep your eyes open, you can find really great deals on organic food at the grocery store.
So you would buy all of those packages and put them in the freezer?
I would, because the sales cycle for grocery stores is 6 to 8 weeks. And now I don't have to buy it at full price in, say, 2 weeks from now. We're good to go for several weeks.
When you hit the produce department, comparison shop. You'll be surprised some organics, like carrots, are usually pretty cheap.
So it's a 30-cent difference between conventional and organic, which is really great if you're trying to buy better quality food, but trying to keep it within the budget.
Don't pay more for chopped or washed produce. Save big money by doing it yourself. Seasonal produce is usually less expensive and abundant. And check out the bargain bin.
Some of the stores will include organic produce in this marked down section, and it doesn't change the price. It's still 99 cents for that bag, which can really save you a lot of money.
Frozen produce can be just as healthy as fresh and often a lot cheaper. And buying the right stuff in bulk also saves. For example, these big containers of probiotic-rich yogurt are a lot less per ounce than single-serving containers. Hunt for low-priced canned foods like these fiber-filled organic beans, 10 for $10.
What you may not realize is that you don't have to buy 10 to get the deal of $1 per can.
Wild canned fish is way cheaper than fresh or frozen, and it's just as healthy. Here's a good tip: only buy food at the grocery store.
Aluminum foil will cost you more at the grocery store than it would if you were to buy it at a different store that wasn't a food-focused store.
Like Walmart?
Like Walmart, Costco, Target.
Watch out for the specialty cheese section. The blue cheese here is twice the price of what's in the dairy section. Steer clear of bottled and canned drinks like juices and sodas. Stick with good old tap water instead. Also, avoid packaged snack foods like cereal bars. It's much healthier and cheaper to make them from scratch from organic whole oats.
If you are intentional with what you cook from scratch, and you cook the things that will have the biggest impact on your budget, then you can actually make cooking from scratch work in your favor.
Bone broth and kimchi are two of the best things for your gut. You can buy them at the store, but they're also really cheap and easy to make at home.
First, buy meat containing bones. It's cheaper than boneless. After eating the meat, instead of throwing the bones away, save and toss them in a crock pot with water and 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. Let sit for an hour, then add onion, carrot, and celery. Cook on low for 24 hours or longer. Remove the large pieces of bone and vegetables, then strain and enjoy.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Coming up, the latest challenges for TV and music star Selena Gomez and where she's finding strength to face them. Pop star Selena Gomez recently checked into a treatment facility for anxiety. TMZ reports the singer was hospitalized twice within the last few weeks for low white blood cell count due to her kidney transplant a year ago. Gomez revealed in 2015 she was diagnosed with lupus. Since then, she's even opened up about her faith and how she relies on God to help her through, saying she often listens to worship music when she is feeling low. Certainly praying for Selena Gomez for a full recovery, and glad to know that she does indeed rely upon her faith to help her get through. It's inspiration for all of her fans as well. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, on Twitter, as well as Instagram. That concludes this newscast, but the news continues 24/7 at cbnnews.com. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a marvelous Monday, everybody. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.